I believe data frees us up to be more creative. When you don't have great data, whether it's about like the intent of our work or what the audience is doing or how the audience is reacting, you actually kind of round the edges of the work, right? Because you're not being as specific about like, do we know what we're really going after? And then, if you have to cast a wider net, it's actually harder to be super creative. And so the more we can be specific about what we're trying to go after, it actually allows for more creativity because you can see what would really resonate and what might work. And then you can track it and watch that. In today's world, we can't do everything. So the real choice, what the business needs us to do is make harder choices about this is more important to do than that. And so using data to really take a look with the business and make those choices together is particularly critical given this period of time.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world listening to Marketing Trends. This is your host, as always, Jeremy Bergeron. I'm super excited to be back in the pocket. Just got back from Colorado, actually. Spent some time in the mountains over the weekend. Back in Austin, Texas, where I wish I could say it's cool, but it's not. But I'll tell you what is cool. What is cool is I finally have someone incredible in the virtual studio today. And normally what I do is flex this person's background and what they're up to. And I could do that for a long time. But I'd actually love to just introduce Suzanne Kounkel into the studio. Suzanne Kounkel is the global CMO of Deloitte, obviously the number one out of the big four. And Suzanne, would you please, for those who don't know, there may be a few who don't know who you are, tell the world what the global CMO of Deloitte does, and welcome to Marketing Trends.
Well, Jeremy, it's fabulous to be here. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So I am, and I do have the privilege, I'm about a year into the global CMO for Deloitte responsibility and role. And the way that I think about that role is really, and I do have both the global and the US role, which is important. I'll comment on that in a minute. But if you think about sort of what I'm, what's on my mind, what's keeping me excited and up at night, a little bit of both. I obviously own the brand, the global brand for the firm. That's very important to all of us. It's an essential asset for us as it creates, really, I always say that it's the lead cyclist on the cycling team so that the businesses can cross the finish line first. So that's always something that we're keeping front of mind, both the power and the security of that brand. I also have marketing that reports to me. Marketing in a global role is always a balance and a dance between what global does and then obviously the interrelationship with what the businesses and the member firms, which is, our word for geography in most of the organizations. So really what we're doing to create demand for the organization. I also have global communications. That is really important to most B2B organizations as they think about really preparing their people for interacting with their clients. And then last but not least, particularly as we're in a countdown to the Paris Olympics, I have partnerships and sponsorships. We believe very firmly, part of our core tenets of our brand is that you don't, in a very challenging world, you don't go alone into that world. And so our sponsorships are a great way. We have a 360-degree relationship with most of our sponsorships. So we're doing work for them. We're a purveyor of their services. We're doing a lot of, kind of media and marketing together. So that's a critical part of us. And then I'm always doing the dance, as I mentioned before, with making sure that the member firms in our world, the geographies, can find themselves in the work that we're doing together. So that I'm always pushing on, is it distinctly Deloitte? And that sort of notion that we want things to always be represented as Deloitte, but that it can be used and made better by the local awareness and the market, facing parts of our organization. So that intersection, that interplay, I always talk about the highest intersection between 2 points, right? That's really critical to us.
And as you're describing all of that, your content is at the heart of what you do. It connects your company to others, teaches them, guides them, and inspires them. But creating, managing, and accelerating content creation is often chaotic and difficult. Empower your content teams with Brightspot Content Management System, made specifically for marketers and corporate communications leaders. No more waiting for a developer to have to piece things together. Put the power to create and deliver digital experiences into the hands of your marketers with a comprehensive suite of ready-to-use tools and functionality. Bring a bright spot to your tech stack with the Brightspot Content Management System. Visit brightspot.com/marketing trends today. My mind goes to two things. One is there has to be a incredibly badass team around you and supporting you. And there's no doubt that Deloitte is full of badasses. If you spend any time looking at what this brand is up to, it's incredible. So talk about that a little bit, just the team that surrounds and supports you from a leadership perspective, and also how you collaborate with this team across all of these diverse industries at the highest level.
Yeah. Yes, I am very fortunate. I actually love the term badass, and that definitely describes the team. I do think about it in sort of two different places where I'm very fortunate. So I'm very fortunate with respect to my own team, the people that directly report to me. And then I'm very, very privileged to have a group of networked teams that do support and amplification, throughout the network. And so that is really critical to me. And I spend a lot of my time making sure that those connections are being made and reinforced, and that is a two-way dialogue always. The second place that I'm very privileged and feel very fortunate each and every day is all of the business leadership. And that is an important part for me. I talked about, kind of global businesses, member firm businesses, as well as the geography leadership. I am very fortunate that is an incredible set of leaders. They are, they understand the power of the brand. They want to interact with it. They're very helpful. They are, without exception, exceptional communicators. And so they're really helping enlist. I talk a lot to my teams about making our people proud and our clients loyal. And they are an absolute, incredible asset that I rely on every single day. So I'm very fortunate that way.
I love it. I feel like there's so many places that we could go, and we'll go to as many as we can, Suzanne, as many as we can. I want to zoom out a little bit and just get your opinion on B2B marketing, and your take on B2B marketing and your approach there. There's so much content. There's so many insights, a lot of insights that Deloitte is producing and has been for years. But in terms of, if you could speak to the Fortune 100 and Fortune 1000 CMO about your take on B2B marketing today, where we're headed. There's so much out there. There's so much you could double click into, but what's your perspective on B2B marketing now as we look into 2024 and beyond? What's your perspective on it?
Well, I have spent most of my career in the B2B world. As many people know, I grew up in the consulting part of our business, advising our clients on marketing and sales issues. So I am very biased with respect to what I believe is sort of the power of the economy, really, which is B2B, right? And I believe that at this point in time in kind of marketing's era, B2B is very fortunate because we are able to draft off of all of the wonderful things that B2C companies have been doing from a marketing perspective for many, many years. You think about the analytics, the digital interactions, all of the emotive advertising and commercials and things like that, right? But we are able to augment that and round that out with all of the things that B2B historically has been. You think about deep, lasting relationships. You think about very personalized, important emotional relationships. You think about the power of the combination of your own people with the interaction with external, what we call clients, what other people would call customers. So I think that coming together is just really, really exciting. And if you think about, how much of the economy B2B is very active in, and, essentially most B2B companies have a pretty significant B2C part of their business model as well. So for all those reasons, I love B2B. I've thought a lot about it over my career, and just feel like now is a really important, for those of you that are sitting out there in B2B marketing, the time is now, right? I mean, with both the tools and the digital interactions and the data and analytics. I just believe that there's never been a better time to be in B2B marketing.
Is there anything that's just that you think is just distracting right now in B2B marketing, where there's a lot of, pizzazz around a certain angle or content where you're like, I don't know, like everybody's going right, but I'm going to go left. Like, is there anything around that world?
The one thing that I think is really distracting, which is sort of a drumbeat, is this whole notion of that you have to pick between brand and demand. I think that's ridiculous. I think we spend way too much time on it. I think that if you're a CMO that is being told that you need to spend, all of your time on demand, I believe that is, a journey that is fraught with danger. Because if you think about one of the powers of the marketing organization, I talk a lot internally with my team around our superpower. And our superpower is squarely in the marketing domain. So it's really important that we don't, accidentally be asked to be a pure sales function, right? There are things that we do exceptionally well that are very additive and different than other members of the C-suite and other departments, right? And so to me, it's really important that you do, again, the highest intersection between 2 points, knowing what your superpowers are as a marketing organization and really bringing those to bear while knowing that you're in service of the business results, right? So making sure that you can always be really articulate about the highest intersection point between those two things.
That's interesting, because I would imagine that there's likely competing interest in both of those two things, where it's like, no, the demand piece has to be there. Oh no, the story and the brand has to be there as well. And then you get the amazing job of communicating all of that to the leadership and also the team and that's supporting these initiatives. I can imagine there might be some challenges when you're trying to balance brand and demand initiatives.
Yeah.
How have you and the Deloitte squad overcome them?
Yeah, well, and you've been in the space for a million years as well, right? So there's always been tension between, simplistically marketing and sales, right? You think about historically, the two executives that talk the least were CFOs and CMOs, right? So those things are age-old, issues / challenges for a reason, for sure. So I don't mean to belittle that. But I do believe, when I was doing this work for clients, and certainly the mindset that I bring to my current role, is that you have to think about marketing and sales as an integrated coverage model for the market, right? And so you want marketing to be in places and at times where it's stronger than what sales could do, and vice versa. So how do you do that? So a lot of it, again, is really making sure that you're using analytics to bifurcate and make sure that those opportunities are present. Part of that is really around sitting down, either literally or figuratively at tables to make sure that people understand who's playing the best role. And then, really sort of tracking it end to end. Always easier said than done. But I believe that the more you have those conversations with the business, if you think about my business counterparts have really hard jobs, they're looking for any assist that they can have. And as long as you're having the right set of conversations and not pretending that it's either all me or all them, right? Then you get to really good places. So that's what we've been working on a lot at Deloitte. And I would, when I speak to peers and we're sort of, talking about shared challenges, to me, that's one of the biggest ones, is really making sure that the business leadership and the marketing leadership are inextricably tied and weighing in. And, candidly, it's something I learned really the hard way. I came up through the business. My role before I was asked to be the US CMO was leading a part of the industry verticals for Deloitte. So when I came into my first CMO role, I was like, hey, I've got street cred. I've carried quota. I've delivered on sales targets. And the first thing that happened was I got sort of stopped in my track by the business, who said, like, we don't think you're appropriately kind of consulting with us and allowing us to weigh in. And I was like, I know, but I know. And they were like, no, you don't know. Right. And that was really important. Right. And, those individuals who are very good friends of mine were absolutely right And the other thing that, even if they weren't right at that moment, which they were right at that moment, but the other thing that happens is the business is moving so quickly that marketing has to be moving with them. And so really relying on the business and that frontline market expertise just makes marketing all that much stronger. So again, those relationships with counterparts, if you're feeling at all like those are competitive or out of alignment or whatever the case may be, there's nothing there's nothing more important for a CMO to be doing than to be knitting together that network so that our teams can really shine and take advantage of the opportunities, because there is a ton of opportunity. It's just a matter of figuring out like who's the right, again, I think a lot, my husband's a cyclist. So I think a lot about the cycling, who should be the lead rider on that day, given the conditions, given the momentum, and then making those changes as the market presents different things.
Is there any are there any metrics that you're relying on more, like to measure the success of brand building versus demand gen? Are there metrics you're paying attention to these things that they're influencing decisions now and in the future? Because we're looking at the balance. Are you looking at any metrics there?
Yeah. So we do have a consolidated set of metrics that we take a look at. I will tell you that we are always trying to do more and better. And by more, I don't mean more metrics, because I actually think that that's a problem with most organizations. But by more, I mean that it's more timely and in context, more significantly. And in some instances that it's a simpler message to interpret, even if there might be a lot of metrics that are sitting behind it, whether they are predictive or what have you, right? So I do think that the metrics are, the things that specifically I'm looking at from marketing are things that I think we can potentially see better than the businesses can see from their vantage. And then what I'm looking for them to provide us are things that they can see better. So obviously they can see revenue, they can see pipeline, they can see, opportunities, and then I can hopefully see things that they couldn't see that are cross business, or things that are strengthening in, for example, in the brand perception area, that they could be using more significantly as they think to pop up parts of pipeline and, and closure rates and things like that. So it's always a dance. The more we can look at data together, but a lot of it as well is putting our data in front of them and asking them to react to it so that we can make sure that we're seeing things the same way, and that we don't have, everybody has bias. So making sure that we're looking at things the same way. So those things are really, really critical. And, the one thing that I would just say that I think is sometimes tends to be counterintuitive is I talk a lot with my teams about the fact that I believe data frees us up to be more creative. Because when you don't have great data, whether it's about like the intent of our work or what the audience is doing or how the audience is reacting, you actually kind of round the edges of the work, right? Because you're sort of, not being as specific about like, do we know what we're really going after? And then, if you have to cast a wider net, it's actually harder to be super creative. And so the more we can be specific about what we're trying to go after, it actually allows for more creativity, because you can see what would really resonate and what might work. And then you can track it and watch that. And the other piece of it that I think is so important from an analytics perspective, I'm going to pause and take a breath. You can tell this is a passion of mine, is this notion that in today's world, we can't do everything. So the real choice, and what the business needs us to do is make harder choices about this is more important to do than that. And so using data to really take a look with the business and make those choices together is I think critical, and particularly critical given this period of time.
And you mentioned, doing the right things with this data, right? There's so much data. I remember speaking to Kevin Warren, who is the former global CMO at UPS,
Yeah.
amazing gentleman.
Yeah,
And
he is
he talked
great.
about that, how so many organizations just have so much data. He came into UPS, another 100, plus year old brand. And so how do you take that and make it meaningful? How do you actually leverage it, like you said, to enhance creativity in marketing campaigns and in the org? Is there an example where data insights led to a particularly creative solution for Deloitte? Like, was there an example you can share with us?
It's been really critical for us over the last multiple years as we've gone through our own transformation to guide the conversations that we're having with the business. But I would say that, the work that we did last year with the WNBA, internally, the campaign was called the WMBA, because it was all about girls who play become women who lead. And that was a core set of data that we had, some insight around as we were taking a look at like what's going to lead to some breakthrough things with respect to women in leadership positions. And so that was the kernel, that was the insight of the actual ad that and the campaign. Now, I will say that similarly with that, there was insight that told us that one of the reasons why our clients choose and remain loyal to Deloitte is because, particularly in tricky times, they want somebody. Yes, they want people that represent all of what we do with respect to the breadth of services, the most cutting edge technology, the ability to team and collaborate. But they also wanted advisors by their side that had similar values, that they thought had integrity, judgment. So for us, that campaign was, grounded in the insight around, girls who play become women who lead. But also we wanted to remind people that we had shown and continue to have a deep commitment to DEI that has, started a very long time ago and continues to today and will continue to tomorrow. So those were some things around those insights that really shaped how we thought about that campaign. Again, I've talked a little bit about our North Stars with the work we're doing are always about, does it make our people proud and our clients loyal? We use that insight to say, like, are our people, like for us, again, we have 450,000 people, depending on the day. So we have an incredible built-in focus group with respect to, whether or not it resonates with real people in the world, right? So we do believe that whether or not our people are really engaging with our campaigns is a great, indicator of how well the rest of the world will. So we do really take a look at that and have it lead us with respect to, are they proud of the work we're doing? Are they showing it up with respect to either their teams or with our clients?
You've been at Deloitte for, is it almost 30 years?
No, never, because that would mean crazy things. Yes, I started a very long time ago with Deloitte.
I mean, I think LinkedIn says 29. I think LinkedIn says 29 years. So it's, we're going.
I honestly try never to do that math.
Okay, but
it's
it's a big number, but I mean that tells me a whole bunch I'm just taking a moment to consider, one, that you've been there for, a few decades, and that means you've also been, you've had a seat in the roller coaster ride of so much emerging technology and innovation, literally across every industry, with probably a focus, in some of the services that you guys. But I mean, you've seen so much in the 20 plus years that you've been in the seat, and it's just, I'm just kind of sitting and like wondering, one, along the way, what innovative things did you see coming that actually came through? Like, think about your career, and like, were there these kind of linchpin moments where you're like, you know what, I think we're headed this way, and then did we actually get there as a world? And were you right about some things that really supported you in your journey as an executive? And were you wrong about some things where you had, look, 10 years ago, I thought, direct mail was going to be a big thing, or whatever it is. Like, as you think about the big bets you made in the past, few decades, What big bets came true? What big bets were not?
Well, just one hopefully funny story. One of the things that I joke about how long I've been with the firm, but there are very good reasons for it, and it's partially tied to what you're asking about. But in the early days when I was with the firm, I would always be like, okay, well, I'm doing something that's really cool, really neat, that makes me a stronger kind of person in business, and I enjoy the people I'm doing with. So I'm going to finish doing that, and then I'm going to quit. Because, at the time, my mindset was sort of like, consulting's a tricky, particularly at the time with all of the travel. I was like, it may not be something that I want to do for the rest of my life. And then, I looked up and then I would be asked to do something different, or I would have a different opportunity. And then I'd be like, okay, well, I really want to do that. And I'm going to do that. And then I'll quit. And then you look up and, 7 years later, you're like, well, hold on. Why would I leave if I'm always being presented with sort of the newest thinking, the seeing things that I wouldn't have seen in other places, having that breadth of exposure, right? And you mentioned as we were talking, as we were sort of gearing up for the podcast, I have had 7 big roles. For me, it was always I could always do really great things that were new and innovative, and the firm would always. I was fortunate enough to be considered for those roles. But for lots of people, they need to go to a different organization to do that. I had the distinct, honestly, it was such a gift because I could bring both my network and my reputation with me as I went to go do those new things, which meant hopefully that I could be more successful faster than I could if I left and went to a different organization. So those are all the reasons why I've stayed. And that is really the backbone for what I would say is the answer to your question. Is one of the things that Deloitte does amazingly well is we believe as an organization, and it's deeply embedded in our culture, is that we are deeply democratic with respect to the way that people participate in the shape of the firm. So I talked a little bit about it, what that looks like from a marketing perspective, but we don't rely on like 5 people to predict the future of the economy or the market. We are asking sort of all of our people, all of our leaders, and for sure, all of our, business leadership to weigh in on that, to recognize what's going, to always be innovating, always be experimenting across the edges about what our clients need and what's helpful, and to make connections, whether it's across industries, across, product lines, what we would call services and offerings, right? And so that means that we can be more innovative. We can sort of not only react to what's happening, but shape what's happening. And it doesn't mean that we have to sort of put all of our money on red. We can do a lot of different things. So there were, yes, there were lots of things that we made bets on. We went to India in ways that were deeply important to our business, in the core of our business, not just in, kind of what was traditionally thought of as offshoring at the time. We absolutely invested in both our relationships and alliance relationships in the technology spaces in times where people weren't necessarily thinking about that. We did some very innovative things with partnerships and sponsorships early on, again, with what we call a 360-degree relationship that maybe others weren't. Even things like in the US, we made some big bets with respect to our government practice. Those were all things that we did that have paid off in spades. But again, I would say that our biggest asset to be able to do that is to know that nobody has a crystal ball. It is more about resiliency and adaptation to what the market, and the more people you can have weighing in on that, and the more leaders that have a voice in that, the more likely you're going to be able to make those shifts. And that's what I believe that our business leadership has done in spades and just done an incredible job at for many, many years.
What would you say is like the culture of collaboration at Deloitte? Like I would imagine there's got to be some like creative contention happening at a place that's innovating so fast. I mean, I can imagine it's not just the people getting together and saying, oh yeah, let's do that. Oh, you're right. There's got to be some interesting, strong opinions and, we should go this way or no, we should go that way. And a lot of times Deloitte gets it right. Clearly. I mean, look at the market, look at the opportunity and the growth of this brand. But take us inside how some of that works inside the organization, how you have so many bright minds supporting so many industries in so many interesting ways. How do you get to solutions? How do you get to collaboration with so many brilliant people working inside of the organization?
Part of the way I just feel personally is I always believe that what you like most about a person or a situation is inextricably linked with what you like least about it. So I always people always say like, well, what are you talking about? And I always use the example of my husband. My husband, Simon, what I love the most about him is he's very direct. He's very honest. And I rely on that, absolutely every day, every moment, right? He shows up that way for me. He shows up that way for our son. And that's critical to our relationship. That also means that when I, on a day where I'm not at my best and I ask him like, do I look good in this? Or am I, I'm going to get that direct answer. So I get both of those things and I have to be prepared. And the benefit of one, outweighs the sort of negative consequence. And I think about that a lot with respect to Deloitte. You are right that we have, I call it the tyranny of abundance. We have amazing people who are every day being very creative, very innovative. They are generating content. They are interpreting the brand. They are creating new assets that may or may not, they are trying to be differentiated in the marketplace. And sometimes that shows up as looking like it's contentious or, fragments the work that we're trying to do in marketing. And so, one big piece of work that we're working on right now that you will see revealed, if you will, in the fall timeline is we have been doing some significant work with respect to how our brand positioning shows up in the marketplace. I'll be excited to show you that later. But certainly in the short term, one of the things that we were very resolute about was that we had to have to know that we were going to land that right. We had to make sure that it was distinctly Deloitte and that there was enough consistency and coherence with it, that when you will see it, whether it's in commercials or, digital activations or experiences that you have with Deloitte, it is immediately identifiable as a Deloitte positioning, right? So that was critical to us. But knowing that, and to your point about the internal competition and what that innovation and creativity sometimes looks like, we knew we had to make it flexible enough that people could actually take it and play with it and extend it and use it. And that magic together, again, the highest intersection between those 2 points. And I called it, I talk a lot with our teams about the fact that meant that the positioning had to be a mindset, not a rule set. And so with everything we're doing now, it's all about like, how do I make sure that it's the highest intersection between distinctly Deloitte? I can feel that it's Deloitte. I know the impression is always Deloitte, but that it is showing up differently because it's in France versus the US, or that it's an internal activation versus clients, right? That it's an AI marketing campaign versus leadership and DEI campaign. So that's what we're really trying to do, is get all of the magic that creativity and innovation and smart people everywhere. But a lot of that is meeting them where they are and making sure they understand the why of it. Then just really kind of taking advantage of where they then choose to take it and what they end up doing with it. And in my opinion, great B2B brands and great brands in general do that exceptionally well. You even think about Google has for 20 plus years, right? They've played with the way their brand shows up in that search bar, right? That when they started doing that was unheard of. So I actually think it's something I spend a fair amount of my time thinking about, is sort of how do you get this distinctly, in my case, distinctly Deloitte, but really lean into that flexibility and emotion of real people taking it and innovating with it and extending it. And how do you get the most value about those two things happening simultaneously?
I want to definitely spend some time on AI. You mentioned that briefly, but I got to touch on this with you specifically because it's obviously a hot topic and it's being talked about everywhere you click these days. And I'm specifically curious about the strategic importance or not of AI as it relates to being a global CMO, like the utility for AI and you and your role and your perspective. Do you have an opinion? Are you using it in that kind of strategic way? If so, how?
Yeah. So we're spending a lot of cycles on AI and Gen AI specifically. As you would imagine, I feel very privileged and fortunate because our businesses are doing a lot of this work with clients. So I get to, draft off of their knowledge and expertise and what they're seeing in the marketplace. But certainly, we're thinking about it really through, kind of two macro lens. The first one is what do those tools allow us to do that with speed and agility that we historically have relied on people to do, but people don't do those things. A lot of the work that people are doing today, particularly in marketing organizations, are things that people aren't actually that great at doing, whether it's looking at large data sets or doing a lot of that really speed and agility type work. So that to me is sort of the easy part of, if you will, of Gen AI. Then the flip side of it is thinking about what are the things that we've never been able to do that we can do that all of a sudden, organizations get blurred, handoffs that used to take us a long time, and that our process or infrastructure is built upon, those handoffs can actually go away. So what does that look like? Like how are we fundamentally rewriting the rules of work? That's a little bit trickier, but we're spending some amount of time exploring it. But we're certainly doing both of those things. To me, it's sort of like the brand versus demand. I do not believe that there is anything in conflict with respect to amazing creative and Gen AI. But I do believe that it's like any other tool that if you use it for the wrong intent or you, kind of overuse it or underuse it, that you won't get optimal results. So, some of the areas that we're really thinking about is, clearly in the analytics space and sort of taking a look across organization. When you think about taking advantage of both things that we do, things that we know about internally that aren't available in the marketplace, but combined with what the marketplace knows, then you get into, some pretty, incredible insight that we've never had before. If you think about particularly derivative content, I'm not a huge fan of Gen AI as the sort of first draft model, but I think with respect to derivative content, like we cannot underestimate how critical that will be. We're thinking about a lot of things with respect to some of our internal Gen AI tools and how they can help. Again, this notion of we have very creative people that are creating a lot of content. How can we help them embed a lot of the brand principles in their work that they're doing? Gen AI and our internal tools around that help us significantly with that.
Are you finding CMOs that you interact with, in other industries, are you finding the CMOs themselves are using it in their role? And is there utility for the actual role? Certainly strategy and content and how teams are using it, but specifically being a marketing executive, are you finding interesting use cases that's just helpful in your role, whether it's scanning emails or helping you create copy, or are you using it in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think, as you would imagine, right? Lots of my peer CMOs are, it's a spectrum with respect to how deeply they're leaning into it. Again, I talked about, I feel super privileged that the business is spending so much time in the marketplace and on these tools. So I get to take advantage of that. You would see like a lot of the big technology CMOs are sort of like, glad you all woke up, but we've been here for a while, so they're doing some
Right.
pretty amazing things. So I think all of that is really great. We have some, in other organizations, they are a little bit more, guarded with respect to some of the risks and things like that. I will tell you that one of the things that I think is really important around the role of the CMO in a world in which Gen AI is becoming more of a factor is, many CMOs originally were sort of like, well, I'm going to rely on either the CDO or the CTO or the CIO, or depending on, the organization and the role, to really be the one that's sort of on the front with respect to how we're going to use this. And obviously that's very important. They have a lot of things, when you think about, privacy and security and cyber and all of those types of things, they would be the ones that have the most knowledge. But I do believe that the CMO role is critical to people getting Gen AI right, because CMOs have, distinctly and more significantly thought about what the customer needs and what this could look like. And sort of, if you think about like this, even the safeguarding of the brand and, all of those, that lens is actually really critically important. So I would argue that the CMO has perhaps, it's certainly not more important, but it's as important a voice in this. And so, I would encourage people in marketing and CMOs in particular to really lean into the conversation. Again, I wouldn't necessarily drive it, but be an active voice in it, because we've thought in lots of instances more deeply and for a lot longer period of time around, customer sentiment, customer data, how some of these things can be used than a lot of the other executives have, just because of what we're tasked to do.
What's your relationship with failing?
Yeah, well, I would say, well, I'm laughing because I don't actually see it as failing. And I know that seems silly, and, you can have epic failures, but I actually believe, and we've done some things in the last couple of years that are more innovative perhaps than we historically have done, although, I think we've been very innovative for a lot of years. But I always, I think our teams have really done a really nice job of being prepared for, if it goes wrong, are we going to be able to stand by why we did it? And if it goes wrong, can we correct fast enough for why it's going wrong? And so what does that take? In my opinion, that takes more voices at the table. It definitely takes the alignment. Some of the things, like if you look back to what we did with the last series, the finale for The Walking Dead, like we were very confident that we had done the right soundings internally and that our intent with that was pure. But we also knew that, it was risky, right? We could take it and it could have gotten away from us. But we made sure that everybody, all of the executives knew why we were doing it. They knew what we had done to sort of test and prepare for that. They knew how we would then, reach back out to those networks in the case that something, was misperceived or we didn't see something and it went the wrong way. And we ended up being successful, right? There are other things that I would say weren't as successful. And to me, the only failure we have is if we're not trying things that could fail. To me, that's the biggest failure, right? Or if we don't stop things that aren't performing well. Because as an organization, we have to make hard choices about, again, as I talked about before, do more of this, do less of this. So to me, those are the two biggest failures. Are you not, I say this, I have a 16-year-old son named Max. And, we've talked for 10 plus years about the fact that if you are not nervous at least once a week, you're not pushing hard enough. Like that's
Wow.
the way, like nobody grows up and says like, geez, wouldn't it be great if I'm like boring and stilted and, didn't learn things. Nobody wakes up doing that. But how it happens is if you're not putting yourself in enough situations where things could go wrong or things could fail. So, I always say, like, if you're not nervous about something, when we did the Green Comet, which was, when the Green Comet was going through the sky for the first time in 15 years.
Yeah.
And we did, a playful spoof on the longevity of the farm, and that we were there when the Green Comet first was last seen and that sort of thing. The RTs were nervous. I remember, talking to several of them, and they were just like, oh, that's great, right? That to me, even if things don't, it's more of a failure if we're not putting ourselves in situations where things could go bad than it is then being positive that things will go great, because that probably means that you're a little bit in a safer space than what our audience wants and where our people want to be, again, to be proud of the work, right? We've all, particularly in the B2B space, seen things that were pretty good, but pretty safe. And in today's world, with the inundation of all the messages we see, pretty good and pretty safe is a failure.
Wow. I love the way you look at failure and how you look at it is are we getting closer to, learning something, winning something? Do we correct or not? But I imagine you being there for as long as you have, being able to own, hey, we went right and maybe we should have gone left, like owning that really beautifully and maybe stopping things like you said in the right time. I think you've got to have some great balance there to be able to get that right versus let something go too long or too far. Incredible.
Right.
We've got a few.
Yes. And I mean, the one, shout out I would say is that I am really lucky, because part of what we talk about as a talent culture at the firm is this notion of sort of connection and, security, right? So I'm very lucky that the firm recognizes that if you want to lead the world, you are going to do some things, because by definition, you're doing things that haven't been done before. So there are going to be, and so knowing that I have people around me that will say, like, yeah, we all said we were in this together. And that provides me with an environment where you can push harder. I am so privileged and lucky to be able to use our executive leadership team in that way, which is fabulous.
Okay, so Suzanne, for the CMOs and the marketing leaders and those also that are really aiming to be where you are, many people that listen to this show aspire to be a CMO, a global CMO. We have a mix of, Fortune 1000 CMOs and also those who are coming that way. So speaking to our audience, listening to the show, what are 3 actionable steps they can take to enhance their marketing strategies in the current business landscape?
So I would say these are my 3 things, right? So the first one is, I would say, be really proud of the work that marketing is doing. So look at data to enhance that. Look at what's happened, because what it will allow you to do is be bolder in the work and the aspiration that you want to do. So that's the first thing that I would say. The second thing I would say is, and I've talked about it throughout this time, right, is be aligned, lean into what the business is doing. So make sure that you have the voice of the business leaders by you. They will help you make the work even greater. And then they will help make sure that the people, again, particularly in a B2B world, that's who is interacting directly with your customers. So they can carry those messages forward. And then, just last but not least is be bold. Everything, you should actually use it as a filter with your plans, sort of say, like, are these things we're sure we can do? And if you're sure you can do it, it's not bold enough. So go back and sort of insert things in there that you're not sure you can do. And then again, put the guardrails on, like, well, how am I going to spot that it's not going well and I can stop it? But absolutely make sure that you are confident that you may not be able to deliver on that plan, and you'll probably have it right.
Amazing. Suzanne, thank you so much for taking time. This timeline today evaporated way too fast. I need like 3 hours to go many more places with you. And I'll say thank you so much for, one, being a part of this conversation and really sharing your perspective inside of a space that's super interesting. We're honored on our side. We're all paying attention to Deloitte and the things it's up to. So thank you for being here. Such a big shout out to you and the executive team there. And this was epic. Brightspot Content Management System enables marketers to launch in just 100 days. It efficiently manages marketing campaigns or updates investors on your corporate site, handling it all seamlessly. With over 100 plus different content types and templates, marketers can deliver a customized, relevant experience to your audience. Additionally, integrate your current marketing automations platform and access instant analytics and SEO recommendations directly from your Brightspot content management system, simplifying tool management. Discover more at brightspot.com/marketing trends.